were part of a political party that was advocating for two states.
Yes.
And to establish Palestinian political home here in this land. October 7th change anything in your perspective of things?
So I separate several things. I began my process of understanding that from the Arab perspective, the goal was never to establish a state for themselves next to the Jewish state, but their goal has always been one, first to prevent the establishment of a Jewish state or to undo the Jewish state once established, then everything else. Often in my talks, I use a quote by Ernst Bevin, the British foreign minister after World War II. If you know anything about him, he was no friend to the Jews, did not support Zionism, but he needs to explain why the British have failed to carry out the trust that they received from the League of Nations to help the Jews achieve sovereignty here, right, to reconstitute their homeland here. They didn't fail the Arabs, they created Jordan, they created Iraq, but they failed the Jews. And needs to explain why. So he says, His Majesty's government is faced with an irreconcilable conflict. He calls it irreconcilable already in February of 47. There are no settlements, there's no occupation, there's no Israel, there's no refugees. I mean, all of the issues that we hear are the cause of the conflict don't exist yet. And it's already called irreconcilable. And he says, look, there's two groups in this land, Jews and Arabs, and they both have a top priority. For the Jews, the top priority is to establish a Jewish state. So the Jews want sovereignty. They're very clear on that. And he says for the Arabs, the top priority is to prevent to the last the establishment of a Jewish state in any part of the land. And this is the conflict, and this is why it's irreconcilable. The Jews want a state. The Arabs want the Jews not to have a state.
They don't fight for their own state, but rather for us not to have one.
Precisely, and that has always been the conflict, but we projected onto them our own desires. We thought that they, like us, wanted a state for themselves, and therefore, like us, even if they're not happy that they're getting less, they would still be happy that they're getting something. And we really didn't believe that they truly wanted everything. Not only that they wanted everything, but they first wanted to make sure that the Jews had nothing. But that became very clear after 2000 with the Second Intifadă. That was already becoming clear then. October 7th made it even clearer because it emerged from a territory which, contrary to all these fake maps of disappearing Palestinian land, it's actually the opposite. This is the first time that the Arabs of the Levant, the Palestinians, control land. Gaza is the first time they control land. And rather than use the land to say, we can finally build Gaza to be the pearl of the Mediterranean, the Dubai of the Levant, yes, the Singapore of the Middle East, we are going to use it in order to make sure that the Jews don't have a state. And that's October 7th. So they have been very consistent. Both their actions and their words have always matched, but we always projected onto them as if they want something else.
In other words, so you do regret the position of the party you were part of.
Okay, so the thing is that there are still Arabs here, right? The people called the Palestinians, they live here. And for me, the top priority, going back to Bevin, is for the Jews to have their own state, to have a sovereign state in which the Jewish people enjoy a solid majority, that can be a democracy where all its citizens, Jews and Arabs, can be equal, and it can be the one Jewish state in the world. That means that the Arabs who live in the West Bank and Gaza need to be under another sovereignty. Whatever it is, Egypt, Jordan, their own, but they cannot be under our sovereignty because then we become a Jewish minority in an Arab state, and generally we know how that ends. So I still want the land to be divided in order to secure the Jewish state. That has always been the priority. What other sovereignty the Arabs will have, what I care about is to make sure that it's not a sovereignty that threatens us. So either it's Egypt or Jordan, either it's a Palestinian sovereignty that has finally ended its century-long battle with Zionism, but what matters is that it's a sovereignty that no longer wants to annihilate the Jewish state.